Hey guys, Jane here, and today I want to talk about things to think about when you are doing a collaboration or an anthology. So, and this is more like hosting one rather than just participating in one. 2017, I took part in an anthology, and 2018, I took part in a collaboration. And they have a lot of differences, but generally it's very much similar as far as a group of people writing in a story together. So when our writers group wanted to do a collaborative, we had never done anything like that before. And I learned a lot of things that through the process. And I wanted to share with you things to consider if you want to organize an anthology or a collaborative. The first thing is, what are you trying to do with the anthology or collaborative? Is it just to work with people like in your writers group? For us, it was very much like learning and growing as writers, particularly for the newer people in the group who'd never been published before. The anthology that was the collaborative. The anthology I was part of was gathering email lists. I've also seen anthologies advertised that were, for attempts to make the bestseller list. Some are for charities, some are for bringing people into groups. I've heard but not participated in of anthologies where like a group of writers in the same genre put their first book in a series or a novella related to their series in an anthology and try to sell it so that basically people can try out all these different series. So if you're doing an anthology or a collaborative with other writers, what are you trying to do? And knowing that going in is pretty important so that you can plan the other aspects of it. Because if you're trying to do a bestseller, you're going to do things a lot differently than if you're, working with your writers group to do a cool project together to gain camaraderie in the group. All right, so the next thing you need to consider, number 2, how many stories are going to be in your anthology or collaborative? And if you want to do a paperback, especially, it's important to make sure that you limit the number of stories. We had 9 writers with stories about between 5,000 and 10,000 words was the limit. And it's not huge. It's very doable as a paperback. Not terribly expensive, which is one thing we wanted to keep the cost down because a lot of us were buying these for family members. The anthology I was part of, I don't remember. I think we had 10, maybe 15. If you're doing an ebook only, you can go a little bigger. Although, in my opinion, a good number is probably 10. I think 10 or close to it, 10 to 15 max is probably what I would consider ideal. Because if you have a ton of people in your anthology, buyers probably are not going to read a lot of the stories. If you have a smaller anthology, they might, but you also want to give them value and you want people involved probably, depending on, again, your purpose in doing it. If you and your 3 best friend writers want to put out an anthology together, then 3 stories is fine. But if you're doing it with a larger group or strangers, I think 10 is a really good number, 10 to 15. Enough to have a decent sized paperback, but not something that is going to be really super expensive to buy. All right, so the next thing you have to consider, how long will the collaborative or anthology exist? And this is kind of a bigger issue if you're using KDP Select to put out your ebook, an ebook version of your anthology. So the anthology I was in 2017, we were in KDP, we were in KDP, so everything had to be exclusive to that anthology, which meant when we put our book in the anthology, our story in the anthology, it had to stay there and we couldn't do anything else with it during the time the anthology existed. and I think it was 6 months, but don't quote me, that the anthology existed as an ebook. Now it is still up as a paperback, but I don't know for how long. But after the 6 months, the Kindle edition was taken down, and we could then publish our own stories independently. If you're not publishing through KDP Select, and or you don't mind having stories that are non-exclusive, it's kind of less of a big deal, I think, how long the story is going to be out there. Because if I can add my story to an anthology plus have it for sale on my page, that's fine with me. Like, you can have that anthology out there forever. But knowing how long the anthology is going to exist is important. The collaborative we did, we have like a whole voting thing in the contract that we all took part in that says basically the people in the collaborative will every so often vote to see if they want it to stay up. Now, with our collaborative, the stories are so intertwined that it would be really hard to separate them. So I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal because people can't really sell the stories by themselves. They don't make a lot of sense by themselves because they're so interconnected. But there can be legal issues with long-term anthologies, and it is a good idea to have everything written out so that people know how ownership is going to work, how copyright is going to work, and things like that. Also, if you are putting out an anthology for money, how that's going to work. I've not been in an anthology or collaborative where I was earning anything, so I don't have anything to add to that. Another thing to consider if you're organizing an anthology or a collaborative, and this again will have to do with what you're trying to do, is the fame and skill of the writers involved. So if you're trying to get on the bestsellers list, you want big names. You want writers who people know, you want people who are going to have a large newsletter and can definitely bring your book up the charts. The one I was involved in, we were trying to build our email list. So we were all kind of mid-level authors. We all had a few books out. None of us, I don't think, was brand new, but none of us were like big names either. None of us were bestsellers in our own right in the anthology. In the collaborative, we had four of us who had some publications, and then the other 5 had not been published yet and were debut authors. So again, that's something to consider when you're organizing. Why are you organizing it, and making sure that you get the right people for that. If you go on an author's forum and say, this is what we're looking for, tons of people will jump at it, but you want to make sure you're getting the right group together, because you're probably not going to make a bestseller with 10 nobodies who are writing their first novel or their first, short story and putting it in your anthology. Whereas, if there was a anthology of romance with Mary Balog and Eloisa James and Virginia Henley, and I don't know if Nora Roberts does historical, but like big names that people had heard of, they could probably hit the bestseller list a lot easier than 10 writers nobody's heard of. The last thing to take into consideration when you're organizing an anthology or collaborative is who is going to do the labor and who's going to pay for the costs involved. The anthology I was part of, there was basically an entry fee. We had to pay our editor for our individual stories, and that was $75. Plus, I think we had to contribute $30 maybe? I don't remember the exact number, to the cover. So we had to pay a certain amount for the cover. I think there was a certain amount for marketing, and a certain amount for our edits of our own story. Now, for the collaborative I was part of, we didn't really have outside costs. There was a person in our group whose family member is a graphic designer who did our cover. We had somebody who was an editor, who is a professional editor, do the editing for our project. So everything was kind of done by members of the group. So we didn't have any upfront expenses, although, if we tried to market, that would be a different story. I have seen anthologies, though, where they want you to spend $500 to get into the anthology. And those are usually ones that are trying to make the bestseller list and have a ton of advertising plans. They may also have rules about how big a newsletter you have and stuff like that. So you want to know up front what are the stipulations so that you can tell people. And so that when you advertise your anthology, you can be like, hey, I'm going to pick 10 people. And if you want in, you have to have written this many books, have this many subscribers, and be willing to pay this much money. And again, if you're doing, that's like bestseller list. Whereas if you're just writing with some friends, it would be more like, okay, the cover is going to be $20, everybody chip some in. So you got to look at what the costs and labor associated with it. In our writers group, of course, like I said, one of the people did the edits. One of the people did the formatting and actual publishing. Another person was kind of in charge of the itinerary and keeping things on track. Each writer was assigned a partner for developmental edits early on and kind of helping the other person get their story finished. We all had different assignments, and it's really important going in to know who's going to do what and to try to avoid one person being stuck with everything, because that can be pretty overwhelming. So those are my tips for if you want to chair or lead any anthology or a collaborative. And I definitely recommend it. It's exciting. If you happen to be having any anthologies or collaboratives that you need romance writers for, message me, and I enjoy them. I would love to participate, again, if it's within my time range, I'm not too busy, and also if it's within my price range. So social media and everything is below. Talk to you guys later. Bye.